All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you!
This is my boomstick!
What's your favorite scary movie?
What up, horror heads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And we are continuing our fantastic fan fest this summer with a first-time guest and a recent fan of the show, but has really done his research, gone back through, listened to a ton of stuff. We've got Greg coming to us from Southern California. Greg, how are you, man?
Hey, guys, doing fantastic. How are you guys doing?
Man, just happy to be here. We were supposed to do this last week. We appreciate you being we appreciate you being patient. Dave had dental surgery last week.
Yeah,
and I had a toilet damn near just explode. I had to replace a toilet last Wednesday.
I've told you about going to Taco Bell, dude.
Yeah, it was a problem. So we are taking advantage of the summer and getting to meet some of our fans. And we are going to be doing the movie Dead Alive as suggested by Greg. But Greg, before we get into that, we always like people when they come on for the first time to tell us a little bit about how they got into horror. So, I mean, what started your love for the horror movie genre when you go back through it?
You know, I don't think my story is super unique. I think there was a fascination growing up with the video store era, walking through the horror section and just being completely enthralled by looking at the cover art. I've heard you guys talk about the cover art, and I mean, some of these old movies, just probably some of the cover art's better than the movies themselves, but it just got me hooked. I have to know what's going on. I think I had a babysitters growing up, and I would say, hey, you know, what horror movies have you seen? I'd say, walk me through. I need to know everything that happens. I'm too terrified to watch them myself, but I need to know every step of the movie. So,
yeah, that man, again, it's another. I mean, like if we were keeping tally, that the artwork at the video store, it pops up time after time. Like I mean, just for people our age, that seems to be because it was eye catching. That's what everybody always wanted to see.
Yeah.
So we're happy to have you here, man. And you have recommended one that we were supposed to do last November, almost a year ago. Mm-hmm. We were going to do the movie Dead Alive and kind of fell apart at the last minute. So now here we are. I mean, so starting off, the thing about Dead Alive is, I mean, a lot of words get thrown around when people talk about this movie. People say it's crazy, it's violent, it's an absurd farce, it's totally batshit insane. So, I mean, the question that we have to start off with is, I mean, what words do you use to describe it? And, I mean, what do you think of the movie, Greg?
You know, I would say, and this has been done, but I would say fun. It's a fun movie.
Yeah.
I would say what gets to me is the creativity behind every gore scene. It's not, you know, it's just fresh, and you know, we'll probably get to that later. But the fresh ideas of how can we kill this person? How can we use as much blood as possible? It's creative. It's fun. It's they did a great job, and you know, some probably pretty twisted minds had to come up with some of these things, but it worked out for us all. So,
dude, twisted just scratches the surface of this one, right? Dave, what do you think, man? How do you describe this one?
There is no movie like Dead Alive. It's in a category all unto its own, because the comedy horror genre is it's huge. Right. It's a veritable cornucopia of comedy horrors. And the first one that always comes to mind for me is always Return of the Living Dead. To me, that's the gold standard. But the thing is, Return of the Living Dead is working with a budget that Dead Alive couldn't have even dreamed of having.
Right.
But that idea of let's have fun, and we're going to do this in a way where you're having as much fun as we are on this level. There's nothing like this, because it is actually executed well. and that's the difference between this movie and basically every other movie that attempts to do this same thing. I've seen a lot of comedy horrors where it's like, okay, well, we don't really have a lot of budget, so we're gonna do gross out, and we're just gonna go so over the top that like we're actually saving money by having so much blood and so much guts. Like there's so much to look at that you actually can't tell that the effect is shit, right?
Right.
It never sells that way. You have to have the right amount of humor in the horror for it to work, and Peter Jackson fucking nails it here. And I think that people often forget that Peter Jackson had a career before Lord of the Rings, and his career was this. I mean, it was movies like this. It was always in that like weird sort of comedy horror area where it was lots of special effects. I mean, that was his thing. So it takes a visionary like him to make a piece of shit movie like this. He fucking rocks, because that's really what this is. This movie's an anomaly. It's not a good movie. This is not a good movie. This is something that Roger Corman would have made in the 60s if he could have. But there would have been a ton more sex. That's the only difference. It is the perfect amount of gross out, the perfect amount of laughing, the perfect amount of family trauma. I mean, it's kind of great. It's almost like it sits in this weird realm, but just slightly askew. Like I think of the perfect movie, like the movie you can put on for anyone. Movies like The Princess Bride, like Romancing the Stone, like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like these are movies that anyone can watch and really appreciate. And I feel like this sits just underneath there, because there's so much of everything in this movie. There's romance, there's there is obviously horror, but there's humor, there's drama, you know, there's something here for everyone. If you watch this movie and say I hated the whole thing, I can't fucking be your friend. Like that's just, you know, that's the way it is. That's science.
Yeah, this there's two big things that I would use to describe this movie. One is this movie is bizarrely self-aware. I mean, this movie is just insanely meta without ever being meta. Like, but it is very aware of what it is every single second of this movie. It never attempts to be anything that it's not. It never tries to go high concept, even when it's presenting these lofty ideas of romance and you know, just and love and you know, just bizarre family trauma and stuff like that. You know, even and as we get into the story, even when you get like a real quick like 90-second recap of a whole B storyline in this family trauma, even though it's shoehorned in there, it still kind of makes sense, and it's a very cathartic moment for that character. So its movie is, like I said, it is awesomely self-aware, from the characters to the story itself to the shots and the camera angles. Just every second of this movie, Peter Jackson knew exactly what the movie he wanted to make was. And that's always something that we end up leaning on when we find these movies that we like a lot, are movies that don't struggle to find any sort of identity. Movies that didn't fall victim to their budget and had to change halfway through, or things start slacking, or there's no consistency. This movie starts off one way and ends just in a just perfect denouement of that type of movie. It is amazingly aware of what it is and what it wants to be, which, you're right, it puts it on a level that on the surface this movie should not be able to approach. Right? No. Like you should not, when a quick glance of the movie Dead Alive, you should not be mentioning it in the same breath with some of those other movies that you just did, like The Princess Bride. But at the same time, it makes sense to do that. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it is amazingly and awesomely self-aware. I think that the other thing that this movie, if I had to, as we are wont to do on this show, and you mentioned Roger Corman, this movie's trauma-esque. I mean, this is New Zealand's version of the Toxic Avenger, right? This is what Troma Films maybe could have done if they'd taken themselves a little bit more seriously. Like,
well, he kind of was the Kaufman of New Zealand.
Yeah, exactly.
Like every country has like their guy, you know, who does like that thing. You know, like Poland has Roman Polanski, you know, and he does like the Martin Scorsese thing.
And now he's got to stay there.
Right.
And so it's just, it's such a bizarre thing with this much gore to present it in a way where it's gross out, but it's never gross, right? It's just insane. Like, and we'll get into just some of the really weird things that they do involving all the gore as this movie went on. But every time I watch this movie, I'm just blown away at how silly little things just really play into exactly what they wanted to do. Like I said, things just like camera angles or just the looks on actors' faces and stuff like that. These people knew exactly what they were supposed to do. And if they didn't, Peter Jackson put them on the exact track to make the movie that he wanted. And I'm amazed by this movie, and I laugh harder every single time I watch it.
Before we move on, I just want to tell you that I am so wet over you using the term denouement. Number one, pronounced correctly, and number two, used correctly. But here's the thing, is that you're right in that this movie should not have any seat at a table where you're discussing literature, storytelling, narratives. It shouldn't, and yet it does.
Right. Exactly.
And that's because the story works. So in a section that we're calling "And the Rest is History," we've got here a paper thin, really, premise, right? Bunch of giant raps rape some monkeys, and now their bite causes zombieism. That's the setup that you need, and you need nothing more, right? So it's kind of easy to dismiss this thing as just the setup, and it's easy to dismiss everything else that happens as just the setup to the party where everything is going to go down, right? But is there something to the plot here? Is there something here that maybe surprises you? Like Daniel, you said that, you know, you watch this movie and every time you're surprised, every time there's something else that you're finding out about this movie. So Greg, I'm going to throw it back to you, as is customary for our guest. What about this story does it for you, or doesn't?
You know, I mean, like you said, it's thin, it's simple, but you know, so going back, when I watched this as a kid, I had no idea there was any ties to the Skull Island. I didn't realize that there was any of that. So watching now, I'm like, wait, Skull Island. You know what's going on? So there's something with that. So I tried to just first off, I tried to go do as much research as I could on this rat monkey to see why would it create a zombie? Like what? And I can find nothing. I know there's a reference in.
You're kidding.
There's nothing. There's actually a book of the natural history of Skull Island. It's like a 2005 book from King Kong, and they even reference this thing, but they basically just say it's a little rodent they had on the island. It was food for some of the water-dwelling larger animals, but there's no reference to why a bite from this would do anything beyond just a bite. So I don't know. I don't know where that came up, but as far as, you know, like you said, creature bites somebody, creates a plague or a disease, and we see the repercussions of that. So I don't know. I'm not the English guy here, so I'm not fully diving into the depths of it. But I listen to your guys' show because you guys have amazing insight on these things, and I'm kind of like, oh, I never caught that. So I'm actually kind of ready for what you guys have to say. Yeah.
All right.
Well, the thing about this story that we're given here is we're given a very relatable guy in Lionel, and seeing just kind of what a day in his life is like, and about how something that starts off so small could be so dramatic and just dramatically affect everything in his life. My favorite part of the story that we get here is this really bizarre trauma response relationship that Lionel has with his mother. And the fact that she has created this environment where she is dependent on him, so she has created this farcical idea that they are codependent on each other, and that he has to have her as much as she has to have him. And we eventually find out that all of this is not the response. It's not response to the trauma that we're led to believe. We're told very early in the movie that his dad died saving him when he fell off a pier at the beach, and that's why him and his mom have this relationship. And it is the way that it is. We eventually find out that he actually witnessed his mom killing his dad and her mistress. But so you find out that the layer beyond just not wanting to let your son go also becomes you have to control every element of his life, because you have to forever convince him that he remembers your version of the story. And so you end up with seeing this guy who starts off just broken. He doesn't have any life of his own. He exists only to keep his mom happy. And every time something starts to go right for him, she has to get in the way. But what's really interesting about the way the story is presented and how well it is portrayed by Lionel is the fact that even when theoretically she should be out of the way, his complete inability to further that part of his life. He can't get past everything that's with her, even though, she's dead. She's just a monster in the basement that he is keeping tranquilized. But he can't get past that because it's so ingrained in him that he has no world outside his mom. I mean, you look at Lionel, you look at Paquita, this dude has to know that he's outkicked his coverage by a mile.
Oh yeah.
This chick should have nothing to do with him, right? But thanks to Grandma and her tarot cards, she's about it. And he gets that, but he can't even let that be a driving factor to separate him from this bizarre relationship that he has with his mom. And his complete inability to let go drives so much of this story. Because if he would have just followed through with and just poisoned her at the very beginning, or just let her, and just let it happen, let her die, hell, keep the casket screwed shut and put her in the ground, then things might have played out differently. But he always, even in her death and the creation of this monster, he still finds it his task to make sure that she's comfortable and that she's getting what she wants. So he's just keeping her tranquilized. He's even trying to do it when she's, like I said, buried. And so there's a really interesting angle portrayed here about the effect that trauma can have on a child and parent relationship, and how it can be manipulated and twisted. So that is what I always take away from this when I watch, is seeing just how terrible his mom is, and the fact that he is so broken and abused from his relationship with her. He can't function without her.
I'm glad that you brought all that up, because there were two things that I wanted to mention when it came to this story, because my brain sucks and all it does is ever overanalyze things. I wish I knew how to turn it off. I can't even fucking watch Family Guy without this thing just turning, right? So that was the first bit that I was like, okay, well, this is I think one of the more interesting things that's going on with this story. But a hot take. All right. There's another thing going on with this story, and I think it has to do with man's obsession, whether it be love or fear of pussy.
Are you gonna get Freudian on us right now?
Yeah, yeah, I'm getting very Freudian here.
See, this is why I listen to the show. This is good stuff.
It has everything to do with this, right? Because if you watch the movie with this lens, it becomes a really interesting deep dive into the psyche of a man who is afraid his entire life of interacting with the vagina, because the very thing that he does to keep his mother alive is to keep sex away, right? So
Right.
he's and his mother, which he fears, right? The relationship he has with her is strictly, she's the person who gave birth to me. So that relationship begins and ends with the vagina, right? And it's no mistake that where he ends up when she consumes him at the end of the movie is in her womb.
Checking that off the list of things I was going to mention.
So, I mean, it's such a gross, but also such a thoughtful place for the hero of your story to end up. Like, she doesn't eat him. And then you can't be so gross as to just shove him back up in there. Right? Like, that's a little too on the nose there. But if her entire stomach, like Thing style, just opens up her entire torso and then it just closes in on him, it's like, fuck, he's gone back to the womb. Right. And that's exactly what this movie's about. It's about man, right, in the general term, right? And as in like the gender, the sex, man. Our fear of that first sexual encounter, because this is a coming of age story. You know, he can be in his 30s. That's fine. It's still a coming of age story because people come of age all the time. Right. I've got friends. I'm 36. I've got friends that still haven't come of age. So, like, there is no too late for coming of age. And so he's been putting off sexual experiences his entire life because he is afraid of vagina. And because the only vagina that he can have in his life is the one that gave birth to him. And that vagina rules by fear. And so his thought is, if I fear that, I'm going to fear the other. Okay. And that's why he pushes away Paquita, right? And because you're right, like she is so way out of his league. Like, they're not even playing the same sport,
right?
You know, and when this, like, he doesn't even know what the fuck is happening at first. You know, he's like, oh, you want to go out on a date? Okay. You know, and she kind of sees that she's the one who has to kind of push this along. And she seems like not like a girl with loose morals, to keep it, you know, in the 1950s, lingo. No, you know, she seems like she seems like a perfectly normal girl. And she's just like, I need to make this happen because he's not going to do anything. And I know that that's the guy that I'm going to be spending the rest of my life with. Because she is also beholden to something too. She is beholden to her culture,
right? To the
tradition, the tradition, right? It's the tradition of your fate is set for you. And even though this guy and like this like hunky delivery dude was just there, she pays no attention to this guy, right? In fact, when he goes to save her from Lionel later, you know, nothing registers. And by all accounts, this is a guy who she should be with, right? Mm-hmm. But he's not our hero, and he's not the one who needs to overcome a fear of vagina. So I really like that reading of this story. I think that it makes it really interesting. It gives it some layers that I think Peter Jackson might have had when he was doing this, because it seems way too intentional for me for that not to be there. Because if someone else picks something up in a story, you obviously put it down in some way or another. I mean, there's some things that are just, they're reaches. I don't think this is that much of a reach.
Well, and I like the idea that we get two very different people who are, like you said, beholden to their cultures.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's easy to just look at somebody following, you know, a tarot card from their grandmother and be like, oh, well, that's just a plot device. But when you look into the depth of that type of occultism and those types of readings and stuff like that, there are plenty of cultures that consider these things to be gospel, like what the cards say. And so I was really impressed by the fact that that was one area of the movie that never became a joke. It was never comical that she was so stuck on having to be with Lionel because that's what the cards said. It was presented in a very respectful way of, this is what grandma says has to happen. Grandma can read the cards. This is what will happen. And then Paquita, like you said, picking up the slack to be like, all right, well, this guy ain't going to make it happen. So, you know, because it was mid 50s, right? Is when this is supposed to be taking place.
57.
Yeah. So for her to just bow up and be like, oh yeah, let me climb up. I brought your jacket back. Let me climb. You know, it was a lot of those like Romeo and Juliet tropes, you know, turned upside down. She's the one climbing up a trellis and meeting him up on the balcony. You know, she's the one coming in through the bedroom window when he's the one making sure his mom is still asleep. It's so many of those things that we've seen the other way because she was driven. It was her call to action was this tarot reading. And it's, you know, so often in movies that's a trope that's just written off as something silly or something evil. And for it to just be, it's just what happened. And, you know, so then you get into that idea of, well, is this happening because the cards told her, or did they guide her and then she made it happen? You know, so were they portents of the future? Or were they the nudge that she needed to create her own destiny? So you get this really fun push off of something really simple as that tarot reading at the beginning that's never portrayed in any light, good or bad. It's just there. Like, it's just part of life. And I love when something like that is taken and it's not a plot device that's abnormal compared to anything else in the movie.
Yeah, no, it actually is part of her character, and it is handled well. It's not, yeah.
So, I mean, so we're talking about Lionel, we're talking about Paquita. So in our next section here that we're calling Zombie Babies and Kung Fu Priests. I mean, regardless of what you think about the story for the movie or how deep you want to get into the Freudian psychology of it all, you can't ever say, even if you don't like this movie, you cannot say that it is not chock full of memorable characters.
Yeah.
So, Greg, when you look at the bizarre cast of people that we got here, man, like who are you going to always remember?
Well, you know, so watching the movie, I was kind of split with the baby, right? Selwyn, I think I saw. So
yeah.
Initially, I was like, "This is the worst thing I've ever seen," and then by the end, I was like, "This might be the best part of the movie." Like,
yeah.
I mean, it was.
I love when it's obviously just like a kind of short dude running in pajamas.
I mean, the kicking of the completely limp doll in the air. It's so terrible. But and the whole reason you're like, why is he taking this zombie baby out for like a play date? Like, why? What is this? It makes no.
It's not the baby's fault that it's a zombie. Yeah. You know, like children need that FaceTime.
It's yes.
And that
brings up something later in the movie, actually.
Yeah.
If you if you were to replace Timothy Balmain, the guy who played Lionel, with Rowan Atkinson, that was a Mr. Bean sketch.
Yeah,
100%,
without a doubt. That entire playground play date was a Mr. Bean sketch.
Oh man, even I mean down to the clearly adult voice they used for the baby. It was just okay. I mean the whole movie. I love the just as a note during the early zoo scene. Just the movie is just like it's kind of like a Mr. Bean-esque like do. It's just it's ridiculous. It's just designed to be funny. So and obviously kicking ass for the Lord. I mean you can't. How are you ever gonna forget that?
That is the line of the movie. I kick ass for the Lord.
Father Magruder is what happens when you're like a year into your D&D campaign and your cleric is just gotten bored. He's like, you know what? Taking a level of monk. Y'all can all kiss my ass. I'm tired of hanging out in the back. Like, Father Magruder is one of the weirdest but most fun characters. Like that was Shaolin level martial arts that he suddenly knew.
Yep, that was phenomenal. And then I have to the line. I will never forget I can't get that high, but your mom ate my dog. I will never forget that. I think I listened to that over and over.
Not all of it.
Not all. It took so much dog out of her mouth.
Oh
Perfect.
man. Yeah, you know, I think I have to approach this as my favorite living characters and then my favorite undead characters. And my favorite living character, like there is no question, I think, that the actress who steals the show every scene that she's in is Elizabeth Moody as Lionel's mom, Vera Cosgrove. She manages to be every bit as twisted and demented as what I imagine Norma Bates would have been. I mean, yeah, there was the TV show and all that, but you know, just going off of that initial Psycho, right? Because we had Psycho and we had Psycho 2 and maybe Psycho 3 at that time, but we still had not seen like Norma Bates. We still hadn't seen her. So I imagine that this is what Jackson was doing. He was like, all right, we're gonna see you know, the Bates relationship here. And that's kind of what we have is we have a Norma and Norman, but we get to see them actually interact with one another.
Right.
And so I really, really like that and what she brings to the role, the way that she manages to be sinister and funny at the same time, the way that she manages to be matronly but also childish. It's an incredible balancing act that she's doing there because she needs to be the villain, and so she needs to be evil, but she also understood the assignment, and so she needs to be comedic. And I don't think I've ever seen her in much else. I'm
there was
through...
something about her
face. Frighteners. Yeah, she was in Frighteners.
Yeah, she was in Frighteners. And I guess she had a part in like the director's cut of one of the Lord of the Rings movies. There was something about her face and her voice that I was like, I swear I've seen her in something other than Frighteners, but I went through her IMDb and could not place what it was.
Yeah, you know, so clearly she's a New Zealand actress, you know,
right.
who Jackson knew, you know, from probably doing student films and was able to get her to work with him. But she is, I think, a cut above the rest. There is something professional about her. Every scene that she's in is elevated because she's in it. And then I think the best thing about her is that transition from dead to undead. When she, I mean, it's kind of sad because it looks like she's having a stroke, like for real. But that she's a good actress, you know. But that scene where, you know, she's having the women's league, the WLWL over, you know, for lunch. I mean, it is just piss your pants funny. It's hysterical, and it's a lot of Lionel making the faces and being nervous and awkward. There's a lot of that, but it's mostly the way that she is just commanding the room without commanding the room. It's great. And then the when the ear falls into the pudding, and the boil that bursts and it goes all over. Oh man, it's just fucking outstanding. Kudos to her. And
that
then
earring didn't even slow her down.
Not at all.
Not a bit.
No, man. Like you mentioned, I just had I had a tooth extracted, a wisdom tooth extracted. I can't possibly imagine how strong her teeth are. That like she could just go to town on that pearl, Fuck me, man. Because like I had a bagel yesterday. And I was like, "Oh my god, that's next level." They don't make them like they used to. And then as an undead, for me, it has to go to Zombie Father Magruder, which is actually not played by the same actor who played Living Father Magruder.
Yeah, same thing with Vera. Zombie Vera was played by somebody else as well.
Yeah, she still provided the voice, but the actual, the stand-in was someone else. But his name is Stephen Paps. Did I get that right? Stephen Paps. Yeah, Zombie Father Magruder. Man, I mean, Father Magruder's a close second for me. But like when it comes to the undead, this guy just fucking nonstop. Every scene he's in is hysterical. The way that like this man of the cloth that you have to imagine like is a very buttoned up and very conservative person, is looking over at the nurse like, hey, are we gonna fuck or what? Like I absolutely love that scene where she literally like sucks his lips off and they're just going to town, and then Uncle Les comes in. He goes, you found your father's old films, did you? Like it, everything about it.
Is that the one with the donkey and the chambermaid?
Oh man, just perfect. What about you, Daniel?
For me, I mean, we've talked a lot about Lionel, and for good reason. The guy who played Lionel, Timothy Balmain, like he so perfectly encapsulates this, like you said, this nerd who's never grown up. And yeah, he's probably in his mid-30s, but he's never had an opportunity to experience the world outside of running errands for his mom and doing stuff for his mom, and seeing his arc develop and seeing that the duty is at the end when he just throws the medallion and grabs Paquita around the waist, plants one on her. You get this really great evolution of the character from Lionel. That being said, as creepy and as unsettling and as stupid as he fucking is, I love Uncle Les. He is so gross. Just in literally every definition and context of the word that you could find, he is gross. His face is gross. He's got the weird like crystal inhaler thing. I don't even know what that is, but he's using it at the same time as he's smoking. And it's like he's got herpes or zits or something. So he looks gross. He gets way too close to people when he talks, and he's just and everything he says is disgusting.
And I love the way that they do that proximity to people, because he puts on a wide angle lens.
Right.
I think it's like a 24 millimeter lens or something like that. And that's what he shoots that with. So you get that fisheye effect.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, take a step back, creepy fucking uncle.
Yes.
Because like, and we all have someone like that in our families where it's like, yeah, no, you got to take a step back. I don't give a fuck what you're offering me to drink right now. I will take it, but you need to move back.
Right. And then you find out that just like I said, as a person, he's just the skis, and he's trying to get the house and the money and everything. He's, every woman that he's ever around, he is just disgusting with. And it's just interesting to find a character like that can be just unsettling and gross, but it's presented in a way that you can still laugh at it and enjoy it. Like it could have been real easy for another actor to take that role and make it something where suddenly when he was on screen, it wasn't a comedy horror anymore. Like, and it became unsettling. Right. But he was gross and he was funny. Like, and you know, when after the party, when he's just got the two knives and you just get like the really bizarre, like fast chopping scene, and then he's just standing there smoking like behind the pile of body parts, and you're just like, I don't understand this guy. I don't know any of his motivation. I don't get this. I mean, I do, right? He wants money and poon, but but then suddenly,
but at what cost, man?
Yeah, exactly. You know, he was such a bizarre character that you shouldn't be able to enjoy him as a character. But the actor who played him, Ian Watkin, just did such a great job of bringing all of that to life in a way that allowed you to still laugh about it and enjoy it, you know. And so I really, really did like him. When it comes to the undead characters, the greaser dude that from the cemetery, man, he was relentless. I mean, this guy got split in half. He was full of so much hate and vitriol at this point that his literal guts had a life of their own in trying to kill Lionel. Like, he really hated this dude down to every bit of his being, to where his actual viscera came to life in an attempt to kill Lionel. And so... But the perfect climax of everything he is as a character is when it's just like leg bones and his torso, and he's having to like grab and make himself walk. It's so ridiculous. But he was the most relentless zombie outside of Lionel's mother. And so, and at the beginning, when you first meet him, it's like, what is this? Is this guy just like, he's like a greaser who just hangs out at cemeteries and beats up people he thinks might be necrophiles? Like, I'm very confused.
Is that not where greasers hang out? That's always what I thought.
I mean, I don't know much about New Zealand, so
it's pretty noble to be that guy looking for necrophiles. Yeah.
I mean, you know, when you say it that way, you're right. I mean, him and his crew, they really did think they were stopping something awful from happening.
It's dirty work, but someone's got to do it.
I mean, if you're going to drink at the cemetery, the least you can do is stop people from having sex with the corpses.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fair trade, right? It's like, hey, me and my buddies get drunk at the cemetery, but we also kick necrophiles' asses. So are we good here?
I'll take a shift.
Yeah. So it's just, you know, but there's just such a bizarre range of people here. Like, even people who just show up for the party at the end, and then you get Gnome Head guy and just all these bizarrely memorable, you know. It's kind of, you mentioned Return of the Living Dead earlier, right? Like, you get these people who don't have names like us, Tar Guy or whatever, you know, like that's what you end up with in this. You just, and then, man, the baby, what is just a living, breathing garbage pail kid.
Yeah.
That, I mean, scientifically, medically, it's not possible.
Right.
You know, for starters,
zombie gestation period is like a day.
That's what I was going to talk about. All right. So, like, let's assume that a zombie could conceive, you know, the gestation period here, we're talking a day. So, like, now what happens to the zombie baby? Like, does it grow at such an exponential rate?
It seems like that thing was stuck there for a while.
Die again? You know,
I mean, it was walking like a week in, man. I mean, it was already crawling around and tore up that radio.
I'm ready to see a spinoff with just the fucking baby.
Did we actually see the baby die?
No.
I'm trying to remember back, and I don't remember.
No.
So it's possible.
Yeah. That's not Peter Jackson just sits on a throne made of fuck you money at this point. Like, why not make that movie?
I'll see it. That'd be good.
In fact, like his company, Weta, like could probably just animate the whole fucking thing at this point, and like just let it be a proof of concept. Like, yeah, you can make a fucking baby zombie movie and people will watch it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man, I'm only signing up if it's practical. I only want to see the practical. I don't want to see CGI someone. I want to see the real thing.
Well, Weta does all sorts of stuff. But yeah, I did say animate. But yeah, Weta kind of picks up where ILM, not that ILM ever left off, but you know, it's kind of like ILM and Weta, like that's it, you know, like these are like the special effects, like what Stan Winston was doing, like in the early 80s when ILM was like just getting started. Like that's what ILM and Weta do today. I mean, Jackson is an incredible movie maker. He's not just a director, you know, and I kind of see us heading towards this way, so let's kind of do it anyway. Let's just jump in there in a section that we're going to call From Skull Island to Middle Earth and Back Again. Peter Jackson has had an absolutely insane career. I mean, he is an Oscar-winning director, right? But on top of that, he's also a director who has won our hearts with movies like Dead Alive, right? So is there anything here in this movie from a technical side that you're like, man, that's really fucking cool, right? And Greg, you kind of mentioned that you're not really like an analytical dude. I'm not sure how deep your knowledge of like filmmaking goes, but is there anything in the movie that you're like, man, that's really fucking cool the way they did that?
You know, so actually I did a kind of a deep dive on this. I watched probably a couple hours worth of behind the scenes, and
cool.
The quick cuts were really well done. Even some of the cheesier ones. I just think back to the punching the girl through the back of the head and having much mouth, but just the quick cut. You had to kind of pause. Like, wow, that looked. You know, I'm not perfect, but it was pretty good. And then I was looking back to the scene when the guy had the lower half of himself kind of ripped off, and it's just his bones there, and he's kind of laying on the ground. It reminded me a lot of one of the transformation scenes in An American Werewolf in London, where the body is kind of below the floor and the legs are there. It just kind of had a similar look to that. And but I mean, I was actually kind of impressed. You know, I was watching the behind the scenes of how they cut the guy's head in half. And overall, it wasn't perfect, but I guess it wasn't as old as I thought it was, but it was, you know, pretty good. I was pretty impressed with some of the what they could do with practical effects.
Yeah, I think when you look at a lot of the stuff here, what you end up seeing is just kind of like you see a lot of seeds of ideas here that kind of show up a little bit through other things. I mean, the most obvious one being, you know, this movie comes out in 92, and then fast forward to 2007, we get Peter Jackson's, you know, King Kong. And so, you know, he you know, going all the way back there, he's like, oh yeah, no, look, I already made a movie in Skull Island. Might as well let me do the King Kong remake, right? So you've got that little stuff. But I think that some of the stuff in the way that character reactions were shot, and some of these things that you see come more to fruition in a movie like Frighteners than you do in something like Lord of the Rings. But the thing that gets me here is, and this is a bizarre connection to make here because they're so drastically different ends of the spectrum. But the way that this movie is scored is amazing and comparable to the way that Lord of the Rings is scored on, like, you know, just like a tenth of the scale. But this was somebody who was very aware of what he wanted to do with music and with score at any given moment. And even though this is the simplest of music playing, every time there was music playing in the scene, it added to the drama and the depth of that moment. And something like that, then you fast forward and now you're making Fellowship, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, before I had my buddies with 3 guitars and a keyboard, now I've got, the entire Australian orchestra or whoever the fuck scored Lord of the Rings, right? Like, and so he moved forward with that. But what we see here is an idea of a guy who understands how much something that simple can add to a scene. When we see the grandmother going back through doing the second tarot reading, because she told Paquita, just ignore the oppression card. We've got to move forward. We've got to move forward. So you get this great scene where he's cutting, and it's like, oh, here they are in the bedroom together, and she flips over another card, and it's oppression, it's death, it's the swords, and you get these great cuts between the mom knowing something's going on, them in the bedroom, her flipping cards, and the music that entire time was building so perfectly that scene ends up being one of the most intense things in the entire movie, and it's guided so perfectly by this score that's bare bones, but it does exactly what it needs to do. And like I said, I mean, you go forward, and I'm pretty sure the Lord of the Rings scores for at least 2 of them won Oscars. So, he pushes forward on a much larger budget. But what we see here is the idea of knowing how to use what you've got to make your movie even better.
Yeah, and I think that that's what this is. It's almost like proof of concept that Peter Jackson knows what he's doing. Greg, I think you nailed it. Like, I don't think any effect here is perfect. There's no effect here that's perfect. And I think that the reason for that really is budget. Because when you're working with such a small budget, you are limiting not just your resources, but your time. And
Right.
when your timetable is such that, like, you're working on like just a couple of weeks, really, like you don't have time to perfect these things, so like, not only do you have only enough money to get the effect done once, you only have enough money to get the effect done once, and you have only this amount of time to come up with the effect. So like, this movie was made for $3 million. That wouldn't have been a lot of money in 1982 to make a movie.
Right.
So like, the fact that we got the sheer number of special effects shots that we get in this movie, it's insane, really. And Jackson knows how, and he would have people to do this, but like, part of the director's job is also like delegating to the right people, right? He knows exactly how the sets need to be lit. He knows exactly where the camera needs to be placed to sell the effect. He knows exactly when to cut and switch to the other shot. Greg, you were talking about like those fast cuts in the editing. That's not just flow. It's also knowing like the effect is sold at this moment. We're going to cut right here, because if you see it for much longer, it's going to start to look like a special effect instead of like some guy got, the bottom half of his, his body ripped off. So there's a lot of stuff here, and to Jackson particularly, work with lenses and angles that really makes this movie feel off kilter. Because there's almost like a very weird, dreamy quality to this movie that has to do with the lens that he used for the camera. He uses this wide angle lens. The focus is always just a little bit soft, and it's this very strange look to the movie that you don't often see.
Yeah, there were times when like trolleys would go by, and it almost felt like a toy, even though it was just actual footage. Like
Right.
it kept you from getting comfortable.
Yeah, and that's actually a trick in photography called tilt shift photography where you can make things look like toys. You make them look like models without it actually being a model. It's a really, really interesting effect that is done really by just focusing with a wide angle lens and just having a very shallow field of focus. So it's a really awesome effect that sells the idea that this is not the real world. This is some fantasy world where there's a Sumatran rat that was created by rats and monkeys, just fucking going to town on each other and creating the best possible version of coronavirus that we could have ever possibly had. And I love that Jackson gets that he gets this idea that like this is fantasy, we're just having fun, and it feels like it's fun, and then little things that he knows because he's studied filmmaking, like actually painting the floor red. Instead of like having fake blood, you just paint the floor red and then just throw water on it. And now all of a sudden it looks like you've got red liquid all over the place. Like brilliant. Like who thinks of doing stuff like that? And it's directors who have worked with small budgets, who had to make movies for themselves outside of the studio system. Guillermo del Toro is another master of this shit.
Yes.
Because ultimately that's really what he does. Like, yeah, he's got his big budget stuff like Pacific Rim, but if you watch something like The Shape of Water, that incredible scene where like they're like fucking and swimming in the flooded bathtub, like there's no water in that scene. It's just masterfully lit and shot so that it looks like it is, and it's awesome. It's amazing when filmmakers like get to flex their muscles, and it only ever happens because it needs to happen, because they don't have the budget for it. And it's part of the reason why I don't poo-poo small budget movies. Are there a lot of bad ones? Yeah, but that usually comes from the fact that these guys don't really know what they're doing, and Jackson does.
Yeah. I mean, so as we've talked about all the things that Jackson does, we just keep getting to it. When it comes down to it, I mean, there's more blood than water in New Zealand, right? When we're looking at this movie, I mean, enough gore to fill a transport ship of King Kong, and just fantastic and bizarre ways to kill people. I mean, what is going to stick with you? What is going to haunt your dreams as you every time you watch this one? What sticks out, Greg? What are some of your favorite kills, man?
So I got to say, it got to be the strapping the old lawnmower to the chest. It was, I felt like this was his way. It's like, how do we take Ash from Evil Dead and go further?
Mm-hmm.
And then what's better than a chainsaw? A lawnmower. Strap it on her chest and go to town. I mean, even the poses were very kind of Ash-esque. That he was doing.
They were. The zoom on the face.
Yeah, going from, like you said, the transition to from this virgin to, I'm gonna escape from under my mom, and now I am chopping people up with a lawnmower. Just the heroic stance, everything. I mean, it was that is probably the easy answer. So that stuck with me.
And they hit us with the Chekhov gun with the lawnmower too.
Yeah, they introduced it very early.
Here it is in Act 1.
Yep, it was real quick. Yep. I noticed on the on one of the movie posters they have a 2-blade lawnmower, but in the movie it's a single blade. I was like, hey, not fooling me with that, but it was pretty cool. It was.
I never noticed that.
Yeah,
I'm with you on the Ash Williams-ness of the role, particularly if you look at that first Evil Dead movie. I mean, he's very much in the same boat as Lionel, where he's not the tough guy, he's not the hero. In fact, by all accounts, Scott should be the hero of that first movie. And it's just by happenstance that that Ash ends up as the hero, but really he's the final girl. That's the role that he fulfills. And he becomes the hero by default.
Go back to our catalog for our in-depth discussion of that one.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we did do that one.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I think my favorite death is one that never actually happens, and I look forward to it every single time, and it makes me laugh every single time. And it's the baby in the blender. The moment that baby is shoved in the blender, I'm like, oh fuck. I can't, and I always forget, like you asked, Greg, like, wait, did we see the baby die? I always forget that we never actually see the baby die, and granted, I've only seen the movie a handful of times, but it's not like I don't know, I've seen Day of the Dead, I don't know, maybe, a dozen times. There's nothing that surprises me in that movie anymore. But in this one, it's like, it's still like, and it's always a couple of years in between seeing it. So I'm like, oh, fuck. That's right. The baby doesn't fucking die here. But I love that moment when you get the blender and the baby's in the blender. She turns around to hit the switch and then she looks at it and then the baby's fucking gone. It's a fantastic moment of blue balls, really, is what it is, because we never really get that payoff with the baby.
No, we saw one head in the blender a little later, but it wasn't the same.
No, it wasn't the same. Yeah, it wasn't the same. The other kill that I really like, we already mentioned, the missing the legs, but the head that lights up with the light bulb once it gets slammed onto that sconce, man, that's a great fucking moment too. And then you see the whole head light up. It's fantastic. It's a really, really great kill. I don't think it's a cop out, Greg, to say that the lawnmower is, the kill, because it kind of is, but there are others that I would, since you mentioned the lawnmower, now you freed me up to be able to talk about some of these other ones. So thank you.
Yeah. I love for lack of a better word, when they deglove the one dude's entire head.
Oh yeah.
And just all the hair and skin just pulled perfectly off the head, but still kind of alive, and you get the scream. I love that one. I also love how, like we were talking about, just this being such a great horror comedy, just every once in a while when they give you that really over the top slapsticky moment. We talked about the scene in the park that's essentially Mr. Bean. We talked about some of the stuff at the top when he's trying to run out of the party and he can't get any traction on the blood floor. It is the Scooby-Doo-ish shit. And I laugh so hard every time. It's so, and it's because, and it just keeps going. It's one of those ones where Peter Jackson had the foresight to be like, look, I could show him slip a couple times, but I'm going to show, and then he stops and gets some traction, and then he does it again. And it reaches that point. It's that whole like Family Guy bit where he hits his shin and he just sits there rocking for like 45 seconds. It's that. And you're laughing because it's funny. And then you're laughing because it's still going. And then you eventually reach the point where you're laughing at the fact that you're laughing so hard at something so simple. Yeah. There are people who try to make comedy movies and who try to make comedy their career, who will never do something as funny as 45 seconds of this guy trying to run on a blood-covered floor. It just, that moment gets me every damn time. I love that so much. I think that I love the fact that like the greaser's guts come to life, and they even create like a little face with the intestines and stuff like that. And I love how over the top gross the mom is when she comes back. So everybody gets injected with the animal stimulant instead of the poison or whatever, and they all just come back as like methed out versions of themselves, except for the mom, who comes back as basically a hybrid between the mom and the giant rat, which makes sense because she's the only one who actually got bit by the giant Sumatran rat. Yep. And so she's got the long nails, but then just the giant old lady tits that are like hanging down like around her neck. It's grotesque. It really is scary for a moment. It's horrifying. And then when you just take the whole thing in, again, remarkably self-aware, they remove the fear and the terror aspect of it, and you can sit back and just go, this is so outrageous and so funny. So many of those little things like that are so great. When he's trying to get him to eat the custard or whatever, and the nurse's head keeps falling back, so he eventually just starts pouring.
Oh yeah.
The pudding or the custard or whatever just straight down her throat. Just so many of those little gross out things are on the surface just these horribly gory and disgusting things. But again, this movie, every second of it knows what it wants to be, and they all just come out so funny. And that's what makes this movie so rewatchable. I always like to mention movies that I think play great in the background at like a Halloween party. And I always try to find those because, when you're throwing a Halloween party, nobody wants to just sit down and watch a movie. So you've got to have something where you don't need to be following the dialogue and, you don't need that much of a story. This movie fits that mold really well. You can be having a party and throw this up there. And if there are people who it's too much for them, you can just, go in the kitchen and get another drink, go out on the back porch, wherever the party goes. But then you get all of these great set pieces that make for hilarious conversation and just sitting around and having a drink and just laughing at how great and how well done this stuff is. And that this movie just is way high on that list of things that would be awesome ones to play at some sort of scary or Halloween party. And it comes down to the fact that the gore is so ridiculously over the top that it never turns your stomach. Even if you're watching, you're like, that's gross. You're still kind of chuckling about it.
Yeah, to me, it's that this movie is basically a cartoon. It's a live action cartoon.
Exactly.
Because if we were to see, for example, Tom and Jerry, if we were to see that sort of violence done in a more realistic way, it would be like insane. It would be brutal. There's no way we would let our children watch this. And yet, because it's so over the top, because it's a cartoon cat and mouse, because of the expressions on their face, because of the situations that they're in, it's funny, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's going on in this movie, where it's like, otherwise you would be like, oh fuck, that's gross, like turn the shit off. But no, it's not. It's just like, oh man, that was gross. And it was it's a great moment where it's like, oh fuck, I can't believe he had to actually spoon the fucking pudding into her, in her trachea. Like that's the kind of gross that you want to be.
Right. Like, I mean, pure gallons of blood. This is gorier than something like Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah.
But Cannibal Holocaust is not a movie that I'm going to recommend to 99% of the people that I know, but this is one where I'll be like, look, this shit's on YouTube now, right? Like, just go watch it. It's fun. Like, I would recommend this to a good number of people. And yeah, like I said, it stacks up gorier than just about anything that we've ever done on this show.
Yeah. I'm not taking tally here, but I would agree with that.
So I heard
Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, so I heard a quote from Peter Jackson kind of regarding the movie, and what he was saying was, he was not out to set to make this, obviously dark horror movie. He was trying to make basically Monty Python. I mean, it was that kind of over the top.
That tracks.
And
yeah.
One of the things he was quoted, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but he was saying basically, mystery is scary. Not seeing is what's scary. When you see everything in great detail, that's when it becomes funny, and that's what he's showing. You're gonna see there's no cutaway. You're gonna see it, and that's what makes it funny. It's so over the top. You're like, okay, there's no one this is not offensive to anybody. It's just fun.
That's a fantastic point, and that's something that we actually see a lot in, or don't see in, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Right.
Like it has this reputation of being this like ultra violent and ultra gory movie, and it isn't. Like there's actually very little scenes of violence in the movie. Like it is terrifying because of what your mind is seeing, the mind's eye, not what you're actually seeing. And the sounds are, I think, the scariest thing about that movie, because you hear the chainsaw, and that is immediately more terrifying than seeing someone get hacked to bits, which you really only see one chainsaw kill in that movie,
right?
And you don't even actually see the kill because you see it from behind the wheelchair. So, that is, I think, yeah, that's brilliant, and it's Peter Jackson. So how is he not going to be brilliant?
Right. And plugged himself into the movie. He was the Undertaker's assistant.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I also love that he does have a knack for putting, he puts himself in his movies in like these degrading like roles, right? Like he never makes himself the hero or somebody really cool in the movie. He's always just like, oh, there he is. Like, and he's just like, get beat up for being incompetent in this one or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's like Hitchcock, he's always just some dude walking by.
Yeah.
But when you see him, it's like, there's Hitchcock, there he is. So this
I didn't recognize him for the first few times around at all.
He looks so
there's
different
no beard on him
back then. No beard. He didn't have the long hair, and he's thin.
And he was a way smaller dude.
Yeah. He's thin. He's a big dude these days. Has been for quite a while.
Yeah.
And when I think of Peter Jackson, who I think of is the guy with the long hair and the beard, who's in an ill-fitting tuxedo at the Oscars. That's what I think of, not the svelte-looking dude that we see in this movie. And if I was fucking Peter Jackson, I wouldn't give a fuck what people think about the way I look either, because I'd be that brilliant and that successful as a filmmaker. What the fuck do you care? So that leaves us really with just one thing left to do, which is rating this movie. And Greg, you are a first-time guest, but I know I don't need to explain this to you. But for those that are listening or watching for the first time, the way that we do ratings here on Shiver is that we never rate a movie against another movie. We only rate it against itself. And because of that, we don't give stars. And we don't give the same rating for everything. So it's not like we're giving a bloody knife or something to everything, or a skull or something like that. Every movie gets a unique rating. Now, the other thing that we do here is anytime we have a guest, we like to give the guest first dibs on what the metric for the rating is going to be. So Greg, have you thought about what you would like to use as our metric for our rating?
Yeah, I think there's no way you can't go with the zombie babies.
Yeah, I agree. you can't not go with zombie babies. Greg, out of a possible 5 zombie babies, how many zombie babies do you give this movie?
So, initially, this movie is exactly what it's supposed to be. It is perfectly imperfect.
Yep.
It is. I don't. Down to the Nazi guy giving him the animal tranquilizer. I mean, it's so obscure. It's. I wanted to say let's give it like a 4.9 just to be like, but it's a 5. It's a 5 zombie babies for me. No, it's 5. I don't want to be the guy, so no, it's 5.
Look, I've well, shit. At this point, I've had 10 months to sit on this one because like I said, we were going to do it last November, and watching it again last night for all of the reasons that we've said, and Greg, I think that you nailed it with it. It's perfectly imperfect. I think that. I open this by saying that this movie is incredibly self-aware. It knows exactly what it wants to be. And when you just look at this movie and what it wanted to be and what it accomplished, I don't think it's fair to give it anything but 5 out of 5 zombie babies, because I really can't find a fault in this movie that is anything worth deducting points for. It's funny, it's gory, it knows what it wants to do. It's got a great character arc. It's got some great psychology worked in there. It's exactly what I want it to be every single time. So I'm going 5 as well.
Yeah, and Greg, you really did knock it out of the park with that statement. It is perfectly imperfect. It doesn't need to be perfect either, because you're not watching this movie to learn the craft of special effects. You're not watching this movie to learn the craft of film editing or how to light a set. You're watching this movie to have a good fucking time. And anyone who watches this movie and doesn't have a good time is not someone I want sitting next to me watching this movie.
Right.
And not for their sake, for my own sake. Fuck that guy. Get out of my house. All right. Leave the beer you brought.
Yes.
But you can get the fuck out now. Thank you. Yeah, and that's really what this is about. So it's 5 zombie babies for me.
Yeah. So there you have it. I mean, across the board, that's unanimous 5 zombie babies for Dead Alive. If you are watching, listening, and you've not seen this one, then and you've stuck with us, then there's no way that this has not enticed you to see this movie. And like I said, even if it is almost impossible to find streaming anywhere, but I found it on YouTube last night, because when I watched this last year, I rented it on Amazon, but it's not even on Amazon anymore. But you can find the whole thing at a Blu-ray rip on YouTube. So I mean, just throw it up on the TV and enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. Greg, thank you so much for suggesting this.
Yeah,
for coming on, man. You've been great. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Oh man, thank you guys so much for having me, man. This is as a fan, this is a pretty cool experience. So
very
cool.
It, guys. Well, we are very happy to have you. For anybody else who may be listening, make sure you head over to shiverpod.com, where you can find links to all of our social media outlets. We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, all at ShiverPod. Links to all those can be found at shiverpod.com. You can also shoot us an email at shiverpod@gmail.com. If there's anything, if we ever mention something and you just can't stand the way we said it or whatever, shoot us an email. We'll shit on it on the air, I'm sure, but we'll talk about you. Also, if you are in the Florida area and meeting Dave or me is something that you would like to do, we have firmed up and confirmed all of our plans. We are going to be at Spooky Empire on October 27th and 28th and 29th, right? It's like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
We are going to be in Orlando for Spooky Empire. The guest list just keeps getting more and more stacked. Very excited. I believe it's the 20th or 25th anniversary or something of Spooky Empire. So Robert Englund's going to be there. Kane Hodder. You can go to spookyempire.com and find the list. We're going to be there. And if you are somebody who knows about Spooky Empire or knows people involved, reach out to us on at shiverpod@gmail.com and let us know. We would love to do a live recording of the show or some sort of panel or something. So if you have any ends with the people of the Spooky Empire, shoot us a message and let us know who we can talk to about maybe getting a panel.
Yeah. That would be a lot of fun. And then for next week, we are continuing our Summer Fan Fest, and we are going to have on a repeat guest and longtime fan-ish from the Pero Let Me Tell You podcast. And we are going to be talking about what he calls the beginnings of his horror fandom with, I can't believe I'm saying this, the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie that we're doing here on Shiver. We have never done a Nightmare on Elm
I
Street.
know, it blew me away when I thought about it when you texted me about that.
Yeah, so we're going to be doing Nightmare on Elm Street 4. We're going to be doing Nightmare on Elm Street 4. It's a good one. It might be the last great one, I think, in the Nightmare series. And you can fight me on that because, you know, I'm right. But I'm really excited to do this. Ish has also called dibs on Nightmare 2. Which I'm cool with. And that's another one I like. That one gets shit on a lot, and I think it shouldn't. So
Dream Warriors is 2.
No, Freddy's Revenge.
Freddy's Revenge. There we go.
Yeah. Dream Warriors is 3.
3.
Yeah.
Dream Child
is 4. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I forget the names of these things.
Freddy's Dead is 5. New Nightmare is 6.
Yeah. Just like Halloween, I always forget the Halloween ones. Like which one is like Return of Michael Myers? I think is 4, and then there's Revenge, might be, and then Curse is 6.
Yeah,
I think that's right. I don't know. It's too late, and I haven't had enough to drink. So yeah. So Greg, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything you want to plug?
No.
Okay.
I got nothing.
All right, there you go.
Man. This has been such a blast.
No, listen, it's just as fun for us. You know, we love having guests on here. We love talking horror. We love meeting people. So this was fantastic. Thank you, man. We had a fantastic time.
Thank you, guys.
And on behalf of all of us here on Shiver, fight you very much.